For many years, I've often said to him, why do people come? What do they come for? I couldn't think what they came for. And then I remember on one occasion I asked someone who'd been here a few times, and I said to you, why do you come? And she thought a bit and then said, nothing. And that's why some people call me Mr. Nothing. I rather like that. I think it's a good description, because I don't feel I have anything really to give to people. Well, at first I was bewildered and what does it feel like? Well, I don't really feel anything, really. Yes, I think I could say that if it's been of interest, what I'm glad is that I've been able to share what I love. And that makes me feel humbly grateful. Well, besides just going out for a walk and just getting in touch with nature as far as you can, just go out and stand under a tree, or even better, look at the sky, open the window and look at the sky. You see, lots of us do that sort of automatically without being aware of it, or with just 1 or 2% of our attention, but we continue to think. I started to meditate when I was 26 years old. So I've got 60 years of twice daily meditation under my belt. That's helped a lot. That's probably the cornerstone of my spiritual life. And people don't always realize that meditation has two aspects. There's what's called the inner turn, when you use a mantra or something to discover the space within yourself. But there's also the outer turn, which consists of giving attention. And it needs to be, you see, attention, we're normally so inattentive. We attend really not even with half our mind, just almost no attention. We're distracted, pulled here, there, and everywhere. So to learn to be more attentive is a very, very good thing. You know, a very good thing that women all used to do years ago was to knit and sew. My mother did it all her life. It's a wonderful natural meditation when you have to pay attention, otherwise you make the stitch wrong. Or people who draw. Drawing is a very good way, or writing by hand, which unfortunately we don't do much these days. Anything that will bring your attention to, sharpen your attention is very, very, very helpful. I was so lucky on the farm. I was born in the time when most farm work was done by hand. People worked by hand, used scythes, hoes, axes and things, all of which you have to be attentive or you do it wrong. Look at the lovely old wooden pews where I hope they show up in the video. See how that woodwork was done by a man with a chisel, carefully working away with attention. Well, that's a wonderful natural meditation that will help counteract this out-of-control mind that we're plagued with these days. Keep your feet on the ground in the sense of attend to what's in front of you. See what's in front of your nose. The old sayings are full of this, aren't they? Pay attention. When I learned carpentry as a young man, I remember Dad saying, hit the nail on the head, otherwise it goes in crooked, doesn't it? Or when you're cutting up vegetables, pay attention, otherwise the knife will cut your finger off or something. Those things are such valuable lessons. get interested in something. See, when you love something, you'll naturally give it attention. That's why to follow your heart is such a good thing to do. Find something in life that you love. You know, it's not only between man and women, not only sexual, but something you love doing, something you're interested in. Then you'll give attention to it. I used to love working on the land. Well, I've always felt close to nature. I was brought up in the country and I've spent most of my active years as a farmer. So nothing's more natural for me than to be working alone in the fields. I never liked machinery. I like to work by hand. So to be hour after hour after hour alone, silent in the field, which I loved, working with the plants and the earth, which I loved, that comes to me very naturally. I still take great comfort from looking at the grass. I love to touch the earth. Well, stillness is something that came much later in life, John. I didn't find stillness until many, many years past. I didn't call it stillness. Stillness has become another rather fashionable word in spiritual talk. For me, it was just nature. Nature is naturally quiet, isn't it? And when you look at a tree, for example, it naturally brings you to something you could call stillness, at least in relation to normal human condition of agitation. Look at the grass, that immediately, or look at the earth, because the earth is still, isn't it? So the easiest way to find stillness is just keep your feet on the ground. Perfect stillness, bingo, no problem. I don't do much thinking these days at all, strange to say. When people ask me what I think, I'm always a bit floored by that question, and I think somewhere along the way I've just gotten bored with thinking. It's so much I think simpler, really, to go beyond thinking. This is what meditation does. It takes you. You see, thinking is just a layer of consciousness, like here. I don't think much about what's happening in my tummy. My tummy is sort of digesting whatever I put into it today, and it more or less takes place by itself. But what I've come to realize gradually over the years is that my head, my mind, is really like a sort of mental digestive system, just digesting what's ever come into it. And it's a sort of fairly robotic thing. It just chews over what's in the news, what people have said. And I think I just got a bit bored with it, really. And you see, it's so much more interesting beyond the mind, really. That's where the big stuff is. This don't fence me in. It always sort of leads me to the stars more, you know. I've just recently been lucky enough to be at sea for a few days and look out over the sea, and it's so big, and mind and attention is drawn to the horizon where the sea merges into the sky, and then beyond that into the infinite, you know. And in contrast, the ship seems so small, like a little prison there of people talking, and human entertainment, and all that's encompassed by the world of man. How small it is in comparison to the greatness of life. And perhaps I've just been greedy. I've always longed for the greatness, freedom, for for infinite love, the love that never says no. So I'm just naturally, they say God calls, respond to that call. And when people say, what do you think? It sort of brings me back into a world I've more or less grown out of, thank God. I don't find much interest really in the world of thinking any longer. I've left it behind somewhere. This is, as it were, after thinking, and before thinking, well, common sense, my dear. If you use your common sense, your mind is perfectly quiet, totally quiet. If you're doing something with attention, even if it's just peeling an apple, or washing up, or scratching your head, if you do it with attention, you'll find your mind is perfectly quiet. You're not thinking. The trouble is we don't do things with attention. We're usually divided, thinking, and that's why there's so little craftsmanship today, and most of what you see produced is surely is careless. See, people dress carelessly, don't they? It has always become fashionable to be dressed carelessly, casually we call it. Casualness has become, well, that's another word for inattention, very, very, well, maybe that's stretching the point a bit, but yes. I love the phrase TLC, tender loving care, which implies attention, really attending to something, carefully, working carefully, taking care of things.
Yeah.
Which is natural. It's not a thinking process, is it? It's living carefully, giving attention. What brings us? It's about coming to rest. Now, most of us know a bit about physical rest. We call it relaxation. What we know less about is mental rest. What is rest? It's really letting go, isn't it? You can't stop the mind because it's digesting the process. You can't stop your tummy digesting, then what can you stop your mind? People waste a lot of time trying to control the mind. But what you can do is let go your attachment to the mind. I use the phrase just get bored with it. Or just find something better, find something more interesting. If you're thinking and your dog comes up, wanting a bit of affection, and you stroke your dog, if you stroke your dog, or your little child, maybe a better example, your child comes up, wants attention, and you just take him in your arms, give him a cuddle, and you'll find your mind becomes restful. At least if you do it with full attention. And if you do it with half attention, neither your dog nor your child will be satisfied. It wants daddy's attention, total, doesn't it? Daddy's or mummy's attention. Child, you can't deceive him. He knows. So does the dog. Now, your question was how to deal with the mind. Well, of course I can talk all day about meditation, but really common sense. In fact, one of my more successful videos is called Common Sense Meditation. And it's explaining just exactly what I'm trying to say now. That just listening, looking, and feeling your feet on the ground is as effective as anything. You don't need to go to some guru in India and dress up in robes and incense and do all those sort of things. Here and now, exactly where you are. That which you seek is right here now, in the present moment. You can never be closer to God than here and now. ASMR, I don't know about the tingling aspect. I've never experienced that. But I know a lot about coming to rest. Well, going to sleep is very similar to meditation. And here I'm talking about a bit more than just the first few steps in meditation, because both bring the mind to rest. When you fall asleep, you go to a lower state of consciousness, not complete unconsciousness, but the mind comes to rest, at least when you're not dreaming, deep sleep. In meditation, the same thing happens, but instead of falling asleep, you fall awake to a higher level of consciousness, where similarly the mind is at rest. It leaves mental activity behind, rather like an aeroplane leaves the clouds behind. You see, the mind is like clouds, and sometimes it's so thick you can't see anything but clouds. You quite forget about the blue sky, the infinite blue sky beyond. But what happens? You get in an aeroplane, and you leave the busy airport, all the chaos of the world. Go, bless my soul, beyond the clouds, there's the skies and the infinite sky. You look down, oh, it's just clouds. That's meditation. And the meditation is just like an aeroplane. It takes you through the clouds of the mind into that. So you have rest from the mind. Just like when you go to sleep, you have rest from the mind. But there you go down. In meditation, you go up to a higher level of consciousness. In sleep, you go to a lower level of consciousness. So maybe just because I've spent so much of my life in meditation, practiced so much and so long, something in my just general what I conveys that rest to the mind, that for those who are looking for an ASMR experience to help them go to sleep, has that effect. So I see the two as very similar, really. Either way, depending what your aim, if you want to go to sleep, it's splendid. Meditation is very helpful. In fact, many people, when they meditate, it's very difficult to tell whether you're asleep or meditating. I'm not sure myself, which it is sometimes. For many years, I've often said to him, why do people come? What do they come for? I couldn't think what they came for. And then I remember on one occasion I asked someone who'd been here a few times, and I said to you, why do you come? And she thought a bit and then said, nothing. And that's why some people call me Mr. Nothing. I rather like that. I think it's a good description, because I don't feel I have anything really to give to people. And most of my life has been a multitude of sort of very mini realizations, really. I think anyone that's really interested better read my books, because they are recorded. Because even from quite a young man, I suppose everybody has these rather special moments, and I happened to write them down on anything I had handy at the time, and that's really what's developed into my 10 books. Yes, I'm not one of these people that had a mind-blowing experiences, really. Well, maybe I've had one or two. But most of my life, it's just been a little gradual, step-by-step progress, unfoldment. There was an occasion when I was 40 years ago now, when I remember first looking into the eyes of a woman and seeing into the infinite beyond. That was a big moment for me. Yes, I speak easily now about the infinite beyond. It seems obvious to me now, but I suppose up till the age of my middle 40s, it wasn't as obvious. I was sort of suddenly thrown into another world. It seemed like another world to me then, and I found it very difficult. For many years I was very lost in between sort of this world and out of this world. Yes, it took me many years to bring the two together really comfortably. I went through many years of really dreadful depression. At one time I seriously thought I was going mad. Yes, it was a dreadful time. I look back on it with horror, really. And when people write to me or speak to me of their own despair, yes, I've known it too. I know all about the darkness. I'm thankful now, because unless you do, you don't understand. You've got to understand. I think to reach a stage of completion, you need to know as much about the darkness as you do the light. We grow through our suffering, our mistakes. They're there for a purpose. I've no doubt about that now. Oh, that's lovely. Well, you look at the sunset or something, just a flower. Because after all, what is spiritual experience? It's just what's natural. Yes, as a farmer, I've lived most of my active years with animals. I loved animals, feel close to them, had many deeply moving experiences with animals. Yes, I always feel animals are angels, really, the big problem is, why do wild animals run away from people? This has always been a cause of shame to me. What is it about man? Almost everyone, on almost every occasion, when you encounter a wild animal, it'll run away from you. Why is that? What is it about man that's so frightening, so off-putting to an animal? I've puzzled over this one for much of my life. What is so shameful about man that nature's afraid of him? And another great, great lesson to answer this question, what's a spiritual experience? As a young farmer, I remember walking across my field of grass and realizing that my feet hurt the grass, damaged the grass, crushed the grass, hurt it. And I've always, I've always recognized what we call fairies, the unseen, spirits of nature. Why is it that they can sit on flowers and I can't? Why can't I be a fairy? And it was that really that made me think about, what is man? Why am I encased in this clumsy great body that can't walk across the lovely grass without hurting it? What's wrong with me? Why can't I be a fairy? Why can't I live among nature which I love without hurting it, without the wild animals running away from me? Now, this is a most important spiritual realization, my dear. If you can get that under your belt and start off from, instead of what's right with me, human rights, myself, I've, entitled to this, that, and the other, start considering what's wrong with me. You're on much safer ground then. And then that you might sort of get a hint that there's something called spirit. Body, mind, and spirit. We tend to live in body and mind. Well, that's just the beginning. What about spirit? And that's when you get to my age, it's only too obvious I'm dying out. Am I dying out, or is the body dying out. Do I die? The body dies out. My mind is getting a bit sort of muddled now. I'm as alive as I've ever been. Real love is, it really belongs to this infinite. We talk of the love of God, don't you? Well, for God's sake, what does that mean? It meant nothing to me as a young man. Now I'm old, it seems the most obvious of all statements, really, that this presence, this infinite space, in fact, is love. You know, when I look at you or you look at me, because we're both being attentive at the moment, we're both giving each other full attention, pretty much as we can, attention. And what's flowing from our eyes? Isn't it love? Because it's natural. It loves every hair of your head, doesn't it? Every wrinkle, every blemish, warts and all. You cannot not. It is a primal principle of creation. So whoever one's looking at, even if you think he's awful when you're thinking about him, just let thinking subside and use your common sense to see what's in front of you. You'll find you love it. You love the very dust under your feet, don't you? It's not, you love every worm. I went through all a young man's agonies. No, in fact, I was probably more mixed up than most people are even today. Tormented by questions of what I should do between duty, what was right, or what I felt was selfish. The social attitude, the social approach to these things has changed very much in my lifetime. I was brought up, none of the self questions that are now so widespread, you know, self development, self fulfillment, none of this was ever considered. It was all about being unselfish. This was the only mention of self I never heard of was being selfish or unselfish. And of course, selfishness was one of the worst things you could be, self-centered. And in many ways, because I didn't really, I also felt a misfit in society. I never really felt very comfortable in the world of man. I always wanted to escape back to my beloved fields, really. So I felt a bit of a social failure. And so this caused me much difficulty when I was a young man. That's much of my life, this sense of not really living up to what was expected of me. It's the most bizarre happening that completely unexpectedly and against my wishes, in later age I find myself as a public figure. As I've become, I'm a bit shy to use words like spiritual, but as it always seems to me a presumption, an unworthy presumption. But insofar as spirit has become more real to me, that shows up, you see, what I like to call sin, which is the dark side of human nature. So in many ways, the more spiritually developed we are, the more we also realize the shadow side, which you can call sin. And so I'm more aware of my failings now than I am of my successes, so-called successes, which is a very good state to be in. And humility is hopefully a consequence of that, because after all, if the aim is towards this infinite something that we refer to God as God, what is man? Man doesn't measure up very well, does he? So Perhaps I never would have been at 25. It's maybe at 25 I made the great mistake of thinking I knew. Now I'm old, I have more confidence in saying I don't know. I'm more ready to admit my stupidity, my human ignorance. It seems so obvious to me now that we live in this world of sort of these sort of objects, of this transitory objects of this world that comes to pass. This world which is like crystallized, the crystallized precipitation of the invisible world. The real world, you see, is this infinite presence, spirit. And this has fallen to a lower state of consciousness, rather like rain falls from the sky. First of all, you have water vapor, and it forms clouds. The clouds fall as rain. The rain forms puddles and rivers and things. And then in winter, it freezes. We're really living in a world of frozen or crystallized spirit. And that's why we are locked into solid, separate, broken fragments called separation, separate people. Millions of separate fragments of the one primal, one undivided spirit. Because the sky is not divided, is it? The sky is one sky. So it's spirit. God's one. Unity. If we come back here to being present, you see, it's happening. I wonder if people watching this video will feel it. This stillness is present, isn't it? You recognize it, and I do. It's become evident between us, hasn't it? Now, this has no end, does it? It fills this space we're sitting in. It's dark outside now, but it passes through the walls, fills the valley. It contains the whole world, doesn't it? This infinite presence. And it's not divided. It's just one, isn't there? One sky in which the whole world is contained. So it said God holds the whole world in his hand. So it is. One infinite spirit. Now this is going to die out. It's already dying out. You can see it. Look at me. There's an old man. It's dying out. And what's left when this dies? That, isn't it? Now this is called John Butler. This is just I am. Now I am is the name of God. Name of Jesus. I am that I am. Now that is undivided. Now in that not only men are contained, but the whole world is contained. All the animals and everything. Now when man falls from that into separation, falls down into this body which is full of decay, will rot away. This is food for worms. That's the fate of John Butler. And of everyone, incidentally. In our fall, this is why that we talk of the fall from paradise. You see, in the paradise, man is undivided. One man, singular, Adam. And then gradually, consciousness fell. And so what happened to the creation? He brought it with him, you see. And so the whole of creation is infected, just like a disease, with this dis-ease of man, which is separation. So all the creatures are corrupted with the same disease. So nature exists by killing and eating one another. The whole thing is just like man has to feed himself. In the real world, you don't have an appetite. There's no killing or eating in the real world, in spirit. All this happens in this lower world of separation. Because we're separated from the source of life, which is spirit, and we've fallen into this separate thing, we're cut off from the source of life, and so you have to, feed yourself physically. Physical body requires physical food. Made a lot of mistakes, my dear. They've made some foolish things. Made a lot of mistakes. That's how we learn, I think. Get it wrong. Pick yourself up, dust yourself down, and start all over again. Yes, I've no easy answers, just live 85 years, I suppose. We say we've never meditated, but see, everybody really meditates naturally. We cannot not meditate. We live in an attractive part, a bit of a tourist centre, and people drive here for the weekend. There's a nice river. They sit by the river, they eat fish and chips and feed the ducks. It just gets them out of their routine, and they have a nice day, have a lovely day. Go home, feel better. It's called having a holiday, isn't it? Holiday is really a holy day, isn't it? It gets us out of our routine, and you see things as it were for the first time. That was the old idea of having a day off work, wasn't it? Sunday was a day when you put God first. Now, most of that's been swept away. But then one extreme leads to the other, and the more unnatural we get in our lives, then the more instinctively people yearn for the natural, don't they? And they discover that nature's all around them, really. And that's why people are so anxious not to destroy it now. They're suddenly beginning to value it, thank God. Beginning to realise that it's a good idea not to cover it all with asphalt and buildings and motor cars. Thank God. We usually learn at the 11th hour, don't we? Things happen naturally, really. Some people take meditation more seriously, but the trouble with giving names to things, especially rather sort of specialist names like meditation, you think it's this rather than that. It tends to be divisive. Whereas meditation is really as natural as breathing. Every time you lift your eyes to the horizon is meditation, isn't it? You're turning to something bigger than yourself. Turning to something beautiful, something that makes you feel better. All this is natural meditation. I suppose at most periods of our life we have an aim, and you see what is useful and what is useless. There's a discrimination between what you want and what you don't want. What is useful to that aim and what isn't. So you tend to choose the companions and what favours whatever it is you're aiming at. I wanted to give attention to what we're talking about. I wanted to give my best to this interview. So I didn't want my mind to be distracted really by other things. So I stopped talking and I turned within. I just reconnected with this infinite presence, which I feel within myself as well as outwardly. And with that comes a feeling of safety. It's like a rock, an invisible rock that you can hold to, a security. And however stupid things may come out of my mouth, if I have at least some connection with this infinite rock, this infinite infallibility within myself, then the fallibility of what comes out of my mouth will be less so, won't it? I wouldn't dare rely too much on what I say, but if what lies behind what I say is connected to this infinite reality, then it's more likely to be worth hearing than if it was just coming out of here. I suppose that's what makes people listen to what I say, because it's not really what I'm saying, it's what arises from that infinite depth within, which has been gradually come to realization through many years' practice of meditation and attention. First of all, you see like what's in front of you, but then if you keep looking, you see deeper into it. And before you know where you are, you're realizing that you're sitting in silence. We're talking in silence. You're connected to perfect peace through your feet on the ground. Well, what's this? Presence. Presence of what? Presence of infinite peace, infinite life, infinite love, spirit, God. How to find God? Common sense, my dear. Yes, we don't know much about mental rest, really. We've become sort of so habituated to mental unrest, restlessness. The world is characterized by restlessness, isn't it? And people go to great effort to try to find peace. They forget that peace is underneath their feet. Nothing could be simpler than finding peace. But we are sort of rather like we're addicted to agitation and not being present. We're absent from presence, you see. We're absent from whatever you call present, just being here and now, expand it into the presence of God. You see, we're absent. We're not present, and this is this is the base of our problems. We're lost sheep, absent. So we need to come back home to presence, which is here now. Dear, I think we muddle through, and I think moments of clarity are quite rare. I think most of the time we don't know which way to go, and maybe sometimes things happen. I don't know that I've really decided almost anything in my life. Things happen, don't they? And it's extraordinary looking back. Have I decided anything of consequence in my life? I'm not sure I have. I think things have just happened, really, for better or worse. Escaping, well, that for me was always just, if it was a room full of talkative people, often it meant just going outside. Yes, I've gone abroad. I never got scared for civilization. I remember as a young man, one of my dreams, I had two dreams: to be a cowboy and to see the world before men messed it up. And I was very lucky. Dad sent me out to Australia, where I did both. I remember climbing a hill in Australia, looking all around, and no sign that man had ever been there. Strangely enough, it didn't quite come up to expectations. I suppose I'd been pretty near that situation for quite a long period beforehand. And yes, I love the old song, "Don't Fence Me In." That's been a guiding instinct throughout my life. I find I get claustrophobic really in big cities, or I used to get claustrophobic in big cities, or people talking. It's long to get out. Well, sometimes you can, sometimes you just have to open the door or open the window, get a breath of fresh air, do what's available, do what's possible. We look out at life not with the true spiritual vision. We look out through these eyes of flesh. What you see through these eyes is spiritual blindness. You don't see the real world at all. To see the real world, you've got to see with insight, or the eyes of the heart, because it's not visible in terms of that you can describe. It's indescribable. It's beyond description. So man brought the whole world down with him. And as it's described in the Bible, God says to Adam, "Cursed is the land for thy sake," see. Now, modern day ecologists are just about beginning to get the message now that the cause of our poor old world is man. But you see, they've much, much further to go, because man brought death with him, and the wages of sin, which is separation from God, is death. This is why we die. In the real world, there's no death. It's obvious. I've just explained to you why it is. This is the world of death, and this is why all nature dies too, because the world is what we make it, and man has brought this fallen vision of life with him, and so the whole world is infected with man's disease, and hence the fate of the animals too. In the real world, which is timeless and spaceless, we can't think it, you have to realize it. That's why it's called realization, spiritual realization. When you see it, it's unmistakable. It's beyond knowledge, beyond this sort of intellectual knowledge. You realize it. And see, human knowledge is really spiritual ignorance. Real knowledge is what's called faith. This is higher knowledge. So you see it by faith. The ego only really exists, see, in the absence of light. In a way, the more awful life is, the more some people at least feel motivated to try to find something better, don't they, or find an answer. So I suppose in that sense, yes, it plays a part. Willy-nilly, whether we want it or not, we've got it, haven't we? Is it necessary or not? Well, this is our human condition. Is there a purpose for it? Well, dear, God knows and I do not. It's a very useful little phrase, God knows. Gets you off the hook, doesn't it? I don't know. I think even before I wanted to be a cowboy, I wanted to be a pioneer as a boy. Yeah, I saw myself taking my axe out, and in those days pioneers felled the forests. Now they go out and plant them, don't they? But yes, I was sort of going out to Canada and being a lumberjack. I always loved working with an axe. No, but more seriously, well, it was serious at the time, dead serious. Well, no, I don't see myself as a pioneer, but it always brings a smile to my face when people say I was. I wasn't I didn't start organic farming, but I was certainly there at the beginning of it, and yes, I suppose I was one of the first. Same with meditation. It's extraordinary. I've seen both organic farming and meditation flourish and become world become universally accepted. Yes, they were both. People laughed at you. People thought I was crazy as a young man. People didn't know what I was talking about. Now everybody does. Yeah. No, I've never been afraid of nature. I've never been afraid of being alone. Spent a lot of time alone in Africa. No, I don't. I'm not afraid of. Well, I'm sort of cautious, but I'm not afraid of wild animals and that. The real thing to be afraid of, you see, is the ego. As Jesus says, fear him able to cast your soul into hell. Fear him. My God, I echo that in my old age. The ego, my dear, is the cause of all our troubles. The devil within us. If you want to see the devil, look in a mirror. You'll soon see him. That's our enemy. That's the one to fear. Three little things to beware of. The tongue is a naughty thing, you want to be careful with the tongue. Don't talk too much. When you hear your tongue saying I, me, or mine, beware. Those are things to be afraid of. They will lead you down. If it's a very, very good start to spiritual life to notice how often your tongue says I, me, mine, and recognizing that every time you do that, you are building up this sense of separation. In the real world, there's no separate I. There's no ego. Even in an interview, I always there's part of me that cringes whenever I say, I think. I wish I hadn't, but it's gone. The naughty tongue said it before I came able to stop it. That's the thing to be afraid of. I'd face all the lions and snakes in the world rather than. That's the real monster. Even other people aren't as bad as your own. The poison starts in here. All the bombs in the world aren't as frightening as this monster. Well, I'm afraid that's a very common situation today, this mental hyperactivity. And it's a great problem for many people. How do you overcome it? Well, not everybody will dedicate themselves to serious meditation, but it's very simple. I've got no better advice, dear, than common sense. Let's come back to feet on the ground. If we were 100% aware, you'd be so full of light, you might even explode. We just don't know what it is to be aware. You might even find something glorious, just to look at something. When I look back on, for example, perhaps most of people who are watching this are no longer children. So let me ask them, where is your childhood? Where is it? See, the interesting fact about life is that we grow out, don't we, of things. I wonder why most merciful God gives us 80-odd years to live. Life is a school. We have to go through many classes in this school. With a bit of luck, we might graduate one day. Perhaps we move on to high school then. Because this life is a very elementary school, isn't it? I assure you, I'm a mere child, spiritual child, a beginner. So, maybe the answer is just be patient. There's an old saying, if you don't like the weather, wait a bit. It'll change sooner or later, won't it? Spring will come one day. So often we just have to be patient. Patient used to be of great virtue. It's not spoken of very much these days. Nature teaches you to be patient. Farming does, doesn't it? You can't hurry the seasons. You sow in hope. You never know what the harvest is going to be. Do your best. What else can you do?